When the earth was still dreaming, before the mountains had names, before rivers found their way to the sea, there was only heat and silence. The planet was young, raw, molten, restless. Lightning struck the newborn oceans like divine signatures, and in those flashes of fire and water, life stirred for the very first time. It began as a whisper, tiny cells trembling in the dark, trying to become something more. For millions of years, they danced beneath the waves, splitting, merging, surviving. Until one day, the ocean blinked and life opened its eyes. From that moment, Earth began to dream in shapes, bizarre, alien shapes. It was an age before beauty had rules, before form had purpose. The seas of the Cambrian were a laboratory of impossible imagination. Every creature seemed like a question no one could answer. There was hallucigenia, a nightmare wearing legs upside down, its spines like daggers pointed at the heavens. There was opabinia, with 5 eyes that glimmered through the murk, and a flexible trunk ending in a claw. And the mighty Anomalocaris, the first true predator, its circular mouth ringed with teeth like gears, its body gliding through the ancient sea like a shadow made of hunger. In those waters, evolution didn't follow rules. It invented them. For every creature that survived, 1,000 others vanished without a trace, erased by time. But in their brief existence, they built the foundation of everything that would come after. Imagine it. A world lit only by sunlight, filtered through green waves. No sound but the hum of alien life, the rhythm of evolution, pulsing slow and patient. Each organism, from the smallest trilobite to the monstrous Anomalocaris, was part of a silent experiment. What does it mean to exist? And in that experiment, chaos reigned. Some creatures grew armor, others grew eyes, 1, 2, 5, or even more. Some floated gently like leaves in a dream. Others hunted with jaws that crushed shells like glass. The ocean was a cathedral of strange gods, each built by nature's wild imagination. But even in this alien beauty, something mysterious was happening beneath the surface. A pattern, a rhythm. As if the earth itself was guiding life towards something new, something greater. In the darkest trenches, where sunlight never touched, there were creatures no human eyes have ever seen. Their bodies glowed faintly, their shapes twisted in ways that defy comprehension. They lived and died, leaving nothing but whispers in the fossil record. Yet it was there, among the forgotten, that the greatest transformation began. Somewhere deep within those ancient waters, a single creature evolved the first spine. It was fragile, barely more than a thread of bone. But it changed everything. It gave structure, direction, strength. From that fragile idea, the future of all vertebrates was born. Fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, even us. And just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The creature that carried that first spine vanished without a trace, its bones dissolved by time, its name lost forever. But its gift remained, a blueprint etched into the DNA of every living being that followed. It was as if the earth had whispered, "To survive, you must dare to be strange." As eons passed, the seas shifted. Continents moved like slow ghosts beneath the waves. The air filled with oxygen. Life multiplied, evolved, and transformed into new and even stranger forms. Yet the memory of those first beings, the bizarre, the delicate, the misunderstood, never truly disappeared. Every fossil buried in stone is a fragment of that ancient dream, a chapter from when the world still spoke in scales and shadows. And perhaps, if we listen closely enough, we can still hear the echo of those first breaths, rising from the ocean floor, reminding us that before beauty, before order, before reason, there was only wonder. Long before the first trees reached for sunlight, before any creature took a breath of open air, the seas belonged to monsters. Not the kind of monsters that haunt nightmares, but the kind that built them. The world had entered a new age. The continents were forming, the oxygen rising, and life, hungry for expansion, was no longer content to crawl in the mud. The oceans turned into arenas of evolution, where strength, armor, and cunning became the only laws that mattered. And from those depths emerged the lords of the ancient seas. The first was Dunkleosteus, a titan of bone and muscle. It was not a fish as we know it, but a living fortress. Its skull was made of armor plates so thick that even the bite of another predator could not pierce them. Its jaws could crush through shells, bone, and even steel, if steel had existed then. A creature nearly 10 meters long, with eyes that saw only motion, not mercy. It was the apex of its world, the ocean's executioner. Imagine the silence before it struck. A still shadow drifting through the dim green water. Then an explosion of speed, a blur of muscle and armor, and silence again. Its prey gone, its hunger endless. But Dunkleosteus was not alone. The seas teemed with experiments of nature's wild imagination. Creatures like the orthocones, giant cone-shaped mollusks that drifted through the deep with tentacles like living snares. And the eurypterids, the sea scorpions, creatures that looked like a child's nightmare given form. Some grew over 2 meters long, gliding through shallow seas, their claws reaching for anything that moved.
Every layer of the water held something strange. At the bottom, creatures that fed on the dead. At the surface, those that hunted the living. And in between, 1,000 shapes, each one a different answer to the same ancient question. How do you survive? The Devonian seas were vibrant but cruel. There were no gentle deaths here, only battles. The strong devoured the slow. The fast devoured the careless. And for those who could not swim, evolution offered a daring escape. From the shorelines came the first explorers of land. They were fish that had grown restless, their fins thickening into crude limbs, their lungs forming from folds of the throat. They struggled onto the muddy coasts, gasping, clumsy, trembling beneath the alien weight of gravity. But they did it. They walked. Each one carried the memory of the sea in its blood, the pulse of tides, the taste of salt, the rhythm of the waves that had made them. They didn't know it, but they were rewriting the story of life. Back beneath the waves, the reign of the Sea Lords continued. Dunkleosteus ruled until his prey disappeared, until the seas changed, until evolution decided his armor was no longer enough. The ancient predator vanished as swiftly as it had appeared, consumed not by another beast, but by time. And when the ocean grew quiet again, smaller fish rose to fill the silence. The cycle had spoken. Nothing, no matter how powerful, could escape the turning of the ages. But as the seas calmed and the land began to breathe, the earth prepared its next act. From the mud and heat, from the ruins of ocean empires, new creatures emerged, strange, scaled, and silent. They carried with them the legacy of those who ruled before, and a promise that the land, too, would have its monsters. As the first amphibians took their tentative steps into the unknown world of air and sunlight, the sound of waves faded behind them, a farewell to the only home life had ever known. The ocean had given birth to gods and monsters. Now it would watch as its children claimed the land above. And somewhere in the deep, far from light, the bones of Dunkleosteus settled into the sand, a monument to an age when the seas belonged to armored kings.
Before the thunder of dinosaurs shook the earth, another empire ruled the land, an age forgotten by most, when creatures neither reptile nor mammal walked beneath a dying sun. This was the Permian Age, the final chapter before the greatest extinction the world had ever known. The oceans were retreating, the air was dry and heavy, and across the cracked deserts of Pangaea wandered beings so strange, so unlike anything that came before or after, that they seem like ghosts from another universe. Among them was Dimetrodon, a predator with the body of a reptile and the mind of a hunter ahead of its time.
Its back was crowned with a vast sail of bone and skin, rising like a blade against the horizon. No one truly knows why it bore that strange fin. Some say it was a solar panel to warm its blood in the morning chill. Others believe it was a weapon of display, a symbol of dominance, a flag that said, "I am the king of this wasteland." Dimetrodon's world was one of survival and silence. Forests of primitive ferns covered the valleys, and massive insects the size of birds buzzed in the air like living machines. Dragonflies with wings a meter wide, millipedes that could coil around a man, and giant scorpions that ruled the swamps. Every shadow moved, every gust of wind carried danger. But the strangest creatures of all were those caught between worlds, not fully reptile, not yet mammal. They were the therapsids, ancestors of both beast and man. Their teeth sharp and uneven, their limbs under their bodies instead of splayed to the sides like reptiles. They looked clumsy, awkward, but inside their hearts beat warm. It was in these half-beings that something new was awakening, a spark of endurance, of warmth, of emotion. They hunted not just with hunger, but with thought. And when they rested, their young nestled close, protected not by instinct alone, but by care. The earth watched in silence as evolution tested its next idea, creatures that could feel. Still, this fragile progress came at a cost. The land was changing faster than life could adapt. Volcanoes rumbled endlessly, pouring poison into the skies. Ash darkened the sun, and the air grew heavy with death. Rivers turned acidic, forests turned to ash, and slowly the balance of the world began to collapse. Species vanished one after another. The air grew still, the seas grew empty. Even the mighty Dimetrodon, lord of the dry lands, fell silent. It was the end of nearly all things, an extinction so vast that 9 out of every 10 species on Earth disappeared. The planet became a graveyard, oceans black, skies red, continents smoldering with the memory of life. For millions of years, silence ruled. But in that silence, something endured. Tiny creatures burrowed deep beneath the earth, waiting for the world to begin again. They were the survivors, the keepers of life's secret. And from them, evolution would rebuild what had been lost. In time, the earth cooled, the ash settled, the air cleared, and from the ruins of extinction rose a new generation of giants, stronger, stranger, born from the bones of the old world. They would inherit the land the therapsids could not keep. They would dominate the earth, the sky, and the imagination of every creature yet to come. But for now, in this twilight between eras, the last breaths of the Permian faded like embers in the wind, and the world stood on the edge of rebirth. Because when life comes back from the dead, it comes back different, wilder, bigger, unimaginable. And soon, very soon, the age of the dinosaurs would begin.
When the silence of extinction faded, the earth exhaled again. Forests returned, rivers were reborn, and from the ashes of the dead world rose the most magnificent creatures to ever walk the land. The age of Titans had begun. For over 160 million years, the dinosaurs would rule the planet. Their shadows would stretch from the burning deserts to the icy poles, their roars echoing across a world still healing from catastrophe. But this was not a world of ordinary beasts. It was a realm of endless experimentation, where nature painted with madness and beauty at once. There was the Therizinosaurus, a creature so strange it defied logic. Its body resembled that of a bird, its neck long and graceful, but from its arms grew claws longer than swords, curved blades of bone over a meter each. Yet it was not a killer, but a gentle giant, feeding on leaves and fruits. A warrior built for peace, misunderstood by time. Then came the Carnotaurus, the meat bull. Fast, lean, and crowned with tiny horns above its eyes, it was a predator unlike any other. Its body built for speed, its skin marked with scales like armor, its eyes burning with hunger. It didn't stalk, it sprinted. A flash of muscle, a blur of motion, and then nothing but silence. And deep in the forests of what is now South America, the Amergosaurus raised its twin rows of spines to the sky. Some say it used them to display, to attract, to warn. Others believe they carried sails of skin that caught the sun, turning its silhouette into a living crown of fire. Each species was a miracle of survival, a solution to a question that evolution never stopped asking. How can life adapt and still remain beautiful? The dinosaurs became more than beasts. They were the architects of ecosystems, the lords of every horizon. From the tiny microraptor that glided through trees like a black-feathered ghost, to the towering Argentinosaurus, a creature so vast that each step was an earthquake. But even among giants there was wonder. The Deinocheirus, the terrible hand, was one of the strangest of them all. A massive creature with a duck-like bill, a humped back, and arms so long they seemed to reach for the horizon. It lived peacefully in the marshes, eating plants and dreams, a gentle soul wrapped in monstrous form. The earth in this age was paradise, a living cathedral of thunder and sunlight, of roaring volcanoes and shimmering lakes. But it was never still. The air thickened, the skies darkened, and once again nature prepared its next act. Beneath the soil, pressure built. Above the clouds, ash began to fall. And somewhere in the void between worlds, A stone was moving through space, a cold, silent messenger of the end. On one ordinary day, as herds of triceratops grazed beneath red skies, and pterosaurs glided over silver seas, the world changed forever. A fire brighter than the sun ripped through the heavens. The impact came with the power of 1 billion storms. The earth screamed. Forests ignited. Oceans boiled. Mountains shattered like glass. Within hours, the lords of the earth were gone. Their bodies burned to ash, their voices silenced beneath dust that would hide the sun for years. Yet, even in death, they left behind something extraordinary. Their bones, their fossils, the silent memory of an age where nature dared to dream without fear. The dinosaurs were gone, but their echo endured in every bird, in every heartbeat that dares to conquer the sky. For even in extinction, life was not finished. It was only waiting for the next beginning. When the fire fell from the heavens, the world ended, and then, somehow, began again. The age of the dinosaurs had vanished in a storm of ash and silence. For months, the sky was black. The sun itself seemed to grieve. Forests turned to skeletons, oceans to poison, and the air grew heavy with dust that blotted out life. But death, as always, was only half the story. For beneath the ashes, hidden in burrows, rivers, and roots, life still whispered. Tiny mammals, warm and trembling, emerged from the shadows of extinction. They were the survivors of a burned world, creatures that had learned to endure the impossible. The giants were gone, but the earth was far from empty. As the centuries passed, the sun returned, and the land healed in silence. From the soil rose new forests, new rivers, new dreams. And from those small survivors emerged a new lineage, a generation of creatures as bizarre as anything that had ever walked before. There was Andrewsarchus, a predator the size of a rhinoceros, with jaws that could crush bone and flesh alike. It roamed the coasts and plains of the Eocene like a forgotten god, its skull massive, its hunger endless. It was neither wolf nor bear, but something far older, something that had survived by remembering the brutality of the past. Then came Ambulocetus, the walking whale, half creature of land, half spirit of the sea. It hunted in shallow waters, moving with awkward grace, its limbs still clumsy, but driven by destiny. In time, its descendants would abandon the shore entirely, becoming the true whales, gentle giants of the deep. On the other side of the world, the rivers trembled under the shadow of Titanoboa, a serpent longer than a bus, thick as a tree trunk, a relic of the time when heat ruled the planet. It moved silently through the swamps, its tongue tasting the air for the scent of life.
its eyes reflecting the ghost of a world that once burned. The earth was reinventing itself. Every shape, every bone, every heartbeat was a new experiment. Birds, the living descendants of the dinosaurs, filled the skies once ruled by pterosaurs. Their wings carried the memory of the great reptiles, their songs echoing through the canyons like prayers of the past. But the mammals were changing fastest of all. They grew larger, smarter, hungrier. They filled every corner of the recovering earth, from the icy mountains to the steamy jungles. Some grazed, some hunted, and some began to think. Every extinction brings a silence, and in that silence, evolution listens. It builds new forms, stranger and stronger than before. In the wake of destruction, the bizarre becomes the blueprint for the future. The survivors of this burned world were not beautiful, they were necessary. Their mutations were nature's scars made flesh, proof that life never truly dies, it only changes shape. And as millions of years passed, the air cooled, the jungles thinned, the earth shifted again beneath the slow grinding of its continents. The great warmth faded, and from the north came a new terror, the whisper of ice. The world would freeze, and the survivors would once again be tested. But this time, they would not face the trial as monsters or titans.
When the warmth of the world withdrew, and the breath of the earth turned to frost, a new kind of kingdom rose from the snow. It was an age of silence, where every exhalation became mist, and every heartbeat echoed like a drum beneath glaciers. The seas retreated, the mountains grew teeth of ice, and in that cold, merciless cradle, life did not die. It adapted, evolved, and adorned itself in fur and horn. They called this age the Pleistocene, but to the creatures who walked it, it was simply the world as it was. The mammoth was the undisputed monarch of the frozen plains, taller than a house, draped in thick wool, and crowned with spiraling tusks like the moon's own crescents. It strode through blizzards as if through dreams. Its herds moved across endless tundras, leaving behind trails that could be seen from the mountains, trails that whispered of migration, memory, and endurance. The mammoth was not alone. Around it, the earth thrummed with giants built for frost. There were woolly rhinoceroses, their bodies armored with coarse hair and thick skin. Steppe bison, whose horns could impale a bear. And the elusive Irish elk, whose antlers spread wider than the arms of a man could stretch, each one a living sculpture of survival and pride. And then there were the hunters. The saber-toothed cats, creatures of muscle and shadow, stalked the edges of the world. Their fangs, long and curved, were not weapons of rage, but of precision. One strike,
one kill, no waste. In their amber eyes burned something ancient, a reflection of hunger not only for flesh, but for dominance. They were the heirs of an old tradition, the endless contest between predator and prey, written in the cold language of necessity. Farther north, in the glacial darkness, another power stirred, the cave bear. It towered over all other beasts, massive and brooding, a creature caught between slumber and hunger. In its den, the walls bore scratches, marks of claws that seemed to know their own mortality. And in those same caves, one day, another creature would arrive, one with smaller hands, but a far more dangerous mind. But not yet. The earth still belonged to the beasts. In the tundra winds, the mammoth herds mourned their fallen. When one died, the others circled around it, touching its body with their trunks, as if trying to remember its warmth before the frost claimed it. They had no words, only ritual, instinct, and silence. Yet in that silence, there was something profound, something human. The saber-tooth, watching from afar, did not understand reverence, but it felt it, a tremor in the air that made even killers pause, because even in a world of ice, there was something sacred about life that refused to surrender. But beneath all this, change was stirring again. The glaciers crept forward like living walls, swallowing forests and rivers. The air thinned, the winds sharpened, and in the heart of this frozen empire, small fires began to appear, orange glows against the white night. Fires made not by lightning, but by hands. The first humans had come, wrapped in furs, eyes gleaming with understanding. They stood at the edge of the mammoth plains and looked upon the giants not with fear, but with awe. They painted their images on the walls of caves, their fingers tracing the shapes of beasts that had ruled for millions of years. It was their way of saying, "We see you. We remember you." They hunted with spears tipped in stone and fire. They sang to the moon and called the mammoth brother. And as they walked the frozen earth, they learned that to live was not to conquer, but to endure. In time, the ice would begin to melt. The great beasts would fade into memory, and their bones would sleep beneath meadows and lakes. But the fire, that fragile flame kindled by humankind, would remain. And long after the last mammoth fell, that flame would tell their stories, in words, in art, and in dreams. Because in the age of ice and horns, life did more than survive. It remembered.
When the ice began to break, and the world exhaled warmth once more, the giants faded like dreams at dawn. The snow receded, rivers ran again, and forests rose where glaciers once ruled. But in the soil,
In the mud and bone of that awakening earth, echoes still lingered. Echoes of hooves that once shook the plains. Echoes of roars that once ruled the silence. Echoes of eyes that had seen a world untouched by human hands. It was the twilight of the great beasts. The mammoths still roamed the northern tundras, their herds smaller now, their paths narrower. The air was gentler, but the world was changing too fast. Grasslands shrank, trees crept north, lakes swallowed the old roads of migration. And at the edges of their world, the humans, those strange fire-bearing apes, grew bolder. They came not just to hunt, but to remember. In caves, they still painted the mammoth, the bison, the lion of the ice. Each stroke of ochre and charcoal was a kind of prayer, an attempt to hold the vanishing in place, to resist the erasure of memory. They did not yet understand extinction, but they felt it, like a shadow behind the sun. On the wide Siberian plains, a lone mammoth cow led her herd across melting ice. She had seen seasons change, blizzards rise and vanish, but never warmth like this. The ground grew soft beneath her weight, and rivers that once froze solid now flowed fast and deep. The calves stumbled, the elders lagged behind, and from the ridges above, the smell of smoke drifted, not from wildfires, but from human hearths. The hunters had learned the rhythms of her kind. They carved her tusks into tools and idols, shaping the image of the beast that gave them life and death alike. And when they spoke to the spirits, they often spoke to her. The mammoth was both prey and god, a being between worlds. When she finally fell, trapped in the thawing mud, surrounded by men with flint-tipped spears, the tribe that took her life also wept. They sang her name, a word lost to time, because in that moment they knew something sacred was leaving the earth forever. Elsewhere, the saber-toothed cats vanished silently, their kingdom stolen by the rising warmth. They were built for the cold. Their power was beauty sharpened by necessity. But the forests that now spread across the land were not theirs to rule. Smaller cats came, quick and cunning, slipping into the new green world where shadows moved differently. The last saber-tooth died in solitude beneath a sky of unfamiliar stars. And in that silence, the earth seemed to listen, as if mourning its own lost children. The megafauna, the titans of fur and horn and tooth, were more than beasts. They were the earth's first storytellers. Their movements carved trails that became migration routes, rivers, and myths. Their bones became temples of memory, and long after they vanished, their shapes endured in dreams, in the minds of the ones who survived. The humans, small and fragile, carried the weight of that loss. Every hunt, every painting, every bone carved into a symbol. It was all an act of remembrance. They began to wonder, why had the world grown smaller? Why had the gods of the ice left them behind? And from that wondering came the first stories of creation and fall. Myths of great floods, of beasts that once spoke, of giants who shaped the land. They weren't wrong. Those giants had shaped everything. In a small cave by the sea, a child traced her finger along an ancient skull, a mammoth skull half buried in clay. Her tribe called it the spirit of the ground. They left offerings of berries and feathers near its hollow eyes. Generations would pass, and one day that skull would be mistaken for the head of a god. And perhaps, in a way, it was. Because the line between beast and deity had always been thin. The giants had not truly died. They had simply moved into memory, into the sacred, into the stories whispered beside firelight. And yet, the earth never forgets its children. Sometimes it exhales them back into the world, bones gleaming white against the tundra sun, tusks curved like the moon, skulls half buried in permafrost. They return as reminders, as questions, as voices saying, "We were here once. We dreamed the world before you." Even now, beneath the ice and soil, they sleep, the vanished giants, waiting for the warmth or curiosity of humankind to awaken them again. And when they rise, through excavation or legend, the echo repeats. Life is ancient. Life is fragile. Life remembers.
When the last echoes of the giants faded into the soil, the earth began to speak in whispers, not in the language of thunder or roar, but in the quiet hum of wind across bones. The world had changed. Forests claimed the plains. Rivers rewrote their paths, and small creatures inherited the silence that once belonged to titans. Yet, beneath every step, every stone, and every mountain's heart, the past was not gone. It was only buried. The bones of the mammoth turned to ivory in frozen tombs. The teeth of saber-tooths slept beneath moss and root. The shells of ancient sea lords became mountains of limestone. The dust of forgotten wings drifted into the air we breathe today. And, in time, when the first humans began to look backward, to wonder what came before them, the earth began to answer. It started with bones.
A hunter stumbled upon a curved white tusk emerging from the thawing ground, as if the planet itself were exhaling a memory. He touched it with reverence. His tribe believed it to be a part of the Earth's skeleton, proof that the world was once alive. 1,000 generations later, another human, clothed in linen and curiosity, would find that same tusk polished by time. He would call it fossil. He would sketch it, study it, build stories around it. But deep down, even he would feel what that first hunter felt, a pulse beneath the stone, as if the past itself still breathed. The earth has always kept its secrets in layers. Every stratum of rock is a verse in an eternal poem. Every fossil a word left by time. And when humans learned to read it, they realized that they were not the beginning, only the latest verse in a very old song. They found the bones of creatures so strange that they seemed like nightmares made flesh. Fish with armored heads, insects large as hawks, birds with teeth, reptiles that walked like thunder and flew like gods. They unearthed worlds that had burned, drowned, frozen, and bloomed again. Each discovery whispered the same truth. Life endures. It changes, collapses, and rises again. But not all memories of the ancient earth are made of bone. Some live in our blood, in the code of life itself. Every heartbeat, every breath, every cell carries a spark that once belonged to those who came before, to the trilobites that crawled the ocean floor, to the reptiles that ruled the sun, to the mammoths that dreamed beneath the ice. We are not separate from them. We are their continuation. When we look at the stars and wonder about our origins, we are also remembering them. The creatures who lived and died before the word history was ever spoken. We are the voice of a forgotten earth, finally learning to speak its own memory. In caves and deserts, in labs and dig sites, humans began to listen again. The paintings on the walls of Lascaux, the carved ivory of mammoths, the skeletons laid side by side, they were not mere artifacts. They were messages. Messages saying, we were here, we lived, we mattered. And if you listen closely, the earth still repeats those words. In the shifting of dunes, in the crack of melting ice, in the bones that rise from the permafrost after 10,000 years. It speaks through fossils and extinction, through silence and song, a reminder that everything we see was once alive, and everything alive will one day be remembered. Now, as the modern world hums with light and steel, we rarely hear those echoes, but they are still there, in the dust beneath our feet, in the oil that fuels our cities, in the stones that built our homes. The earth is an ancient archive, and every footprint we leave becomes part of its next chapter. And maybe someday, when we are gone, another form of life will uncover our bones, hold them against the sunlight, and whisper, "These were the strange creatures that ruled the world once, the humans," because that is the true legacy of the forgotten earth, not just the survival of life, but the endurance of memory. The earth remembers everything, every wing that rose, every eye that closed, every heart that dared to beat beneath a sky that did not promise mercy. The world we walk today is built upon their dreams, and when we speak their names, mammoth, saber-tooth, ammonite, dinosaur, we awaken them for a moment, and the forgotten earth breathes again.